A fewish years ago, my boyfriend, now husband, and I found a Ouija board at a garage sale for $1. The man told my boyfriend, "This will change your life." A couple of weeks later, we decided to use it. We had a few friends over, lit some candles, and tried to get serious. There was giggling and general silliness. We finally calmed down and tried using the board with different pairs of people. Our first encounter, I was with my boyfriend and the planchette was moving very slowly. It said it was a 5-year-old girl. Not much came from the conversation. The next spirit contacted. The planchette moved very quickly and we asked its name. It said H-A-G. It spelt hag. Then we asked how old it was and it said 5,000 years. We left the conversation because of how sick it made us feel. Next, I paired with my boyfriend's best friend. We hadn't known each other long. The spirit we encountered moved slowly but flowed easily. It said Grandpa Dick. I had a grandpa named Richard who passed away a few years before. We asked what religion I grew up, and it said Mormon. We asked why I don't talk to my dad, and it said alcohol. This was crazy. I really was talking to my grandpa. I was crying and beside myself because it was just so surreal. We said goodbye. The next day I was alone and had a strong urge to use the board to contact my grandpa again. I then decided to look up Ouija boards before I did that. Not only did I learn that you should never use them alone because you close the circuit and that's an easy way to become possessed, I also learnt that bad spirits will pretend to be ones that love you to get to you. I'm convinced whatever hag was trying to pretend to be my grandpa, and I've never used a Ouija board since. I used to play a lot when I was younger, 16 or so. My best friend introduced me and it was something I kind of found fascinating. In fact, the only colourless dream I ever had was after talking to a spirit and she came to me and confirmed everything. Unfortunately, I also had an experience that caused me to throw my board in a bonfire. My good friend I had came over with a skeptic and made fun of me. I told him if it was all a joke to him, then to try it. We played about 20 minutes doing the usual silly questions with 2 spirits until whatever came to that board the third time absolutely sent chills down my back. I couldn't actually pinpoint why. We went through the usual questions and my friend was getting bored and, well, being the skeptic and dick he can sometimes be, taunted it. I don't remember what he was saying to it. I know he challenged it and it took that as an invitation. At some point I was bawling, scared out of my wits, on the phone with my best friend as we were repeating goodbye and it would jerk to no. Hell, it's given me the creeps remembering this. I said enough and threw him and his buddy out. I didn't dare touch that Ouija board to close it, so I burnt it as per instructions I read online that night because I wasn't about to let it sit around as an open invitation. That thing clung to him, wreaked havoc on his life, never letting him sleep, and terrified this man, who is the size of a linebacker, to tears. He moved house, it followed him. He got a medicine man from one of the local tribes to try and rid this thing. He took 3 steps in the door and he told him, "I can't help you. I will burn sage throughout the house, but what you have here is beyond anything I can help you with." He has tried to convince local priests to help him too, but they refuse. He has scoured heaven and earth to do anything to get rid of it. He moved 3 times due to that thing. I keep in contact with him now as this happened close to 10 years ago, and he says things will still happen here and there, but now that he has found religion, he can keep things under control and it keeps its distance. I've talked to him many times about this, and each time he says, "You know I can't talk about it. Just know it won't leave and I don't want to put you at risk." I saw this guy go from happy-go-lucky to losing everything from his job to his girlfriend to his sanity. He rarely slept. That thing changed him, sucked him dry. He is doing better now, but a little part of me still often wonders what he experienced. I just know his warning and demeanour was enough for me to never want to touch one again. This is my Ouija board experience. One night, me and my co-workers decided to play with a Ouija board outside of work. We talked to a girl named Quinn, who said she was a demon. She seemed pretty cool, till towards the end of talking to her, we decided we needed to head home because it was like 2 a.m, but she wouldn't let us say goodbye until we promised that if we ever used the Ouija board again, that we would talk to her. About a week later, the place where we worked caught on fire. So a few days after that, we go to the lake and used the Ouija board again and asked for Quinn. We asked if she had started the fire and she told us that she did. Then it seemed like Quinn got scared or overpowered because the board started acting up, spelling Z-O-Z-O, Zozo, and starting to count backwards. We quickly said goodbye and moved the planchette to goodbye. After 2 weeks later, I was driving to my friend's house. I should mention that the friend was a girl I was seeing at the time, and she was cheating on me and using me. I didn't know this at the time. I guess Quinn knew, though, because she seemed mad, protecting and jealous when me and my friends mentioned this girl's name the first time we used the Ouija board. So on the way to her house, I hydroplaned and flipped my truck. I have to add that the Ouija board is in the truck. Some people driving down the road stopped to help to get the door open, and I climbed up and out. When the cops arrived, they made sure I was okay and said they had to write me a ticket just because of the accident. I don't have the ticket anymore because this happened about 4 years ago. But the address site of the accident was Route 666, Virginia. I played the Ouija board for the first time when I was 10, in the woods with my friend. And it was her grandma's old board, which she had made herself. She was a witch, might I add. So yeah, we kind of screwed ourselves from the beginning. But we used it in the woods. And it was where this guy had killed his daughter, who was our friend. And we really wanted to contact her. At first I thought my friend was just playing around with me. So I made her stop touching the board. And when she did, I played alone. As I was playing alone, I got a voice in my head telling me to put my blood on the board. So I did. And after that, the board piece went flying, and my friend tried to burn the board, but I told her not to. She did, but it wouldn't burn, so now I have the board to this day in a storage unit, and ever since that day, a little girl has been following me, and I still see her, but I know it's something darker than a little girl. She's proved that to me, and it still terrifies me and my boyfriend. Even my boyfriend has seen her. I have many stories. I'm not sure where to begin. Let's go with Kurt Cobain. I was 15 when I began experimenting with the Ouija board. I didn't really know anything about the dark side of it, as my grandmother played it with me when I was very young. The board my grandma chose to play with me was supposedly my great-grandmother's, and then her mother's, and I was told later my great-grandmother was very intrigued by the supernatural. Anyway, the board has significance to me due to this, and I held it in the highest regard, as my only relic from my ancestry. It began innocent enough, and always played with a friend. We'd joke and play, asking all the mundane questions. After about 20 questions answered correctly, with no way of the other person's playing knowing, I was hooked. I had a magnetic connection to the board, to be honest. Never felt a connection like that since, actually. Soon, I found myself playing with it constantly. Once I was out of school, I wanted to play with it. I realised none of my friends were as interested as I was in the thing, so yes, despite the warnings, I played by myself. This would be the beginning of my curse, I do believe. I would play hooky so I could play an entire school day. I couldn't put the planchette down. I spoke to Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, several past classmates, and the most prominent, Kurt Cobain. He died when my obsession was spawning, so naturally, being a fan, I couldn't wait to reach him. I remember trying a few times before it felt authentic, but eventually it was, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. He told me to get the word out about his murder. He told me to somehow get his wife investigated. He was pleading. I would get lost in a trance-like state and realise 4 or 5 hours would go by without me ever stopping. He told me some pretty amazing stuff that I can't really remember today, but no, they were profound enough for me to tell everyone, and I do mean everyone. He told me Courtney killed him and staged his death. I still, to this day, do not understand how she got away with it all. It really doesn't make sense. This actually forced me to realise a few things quite early in life. I had a couple of people that said they believed me, but no one did. My parents didn't, and it really drove me nuts. I started doing some crazy teenage angst things and morbidly wore a picture of him safety pinned to my clothes daily. Living in my hometown where I went to school, I never really knew the actions of a 15-year-old would be still brought up today. But whatever, point is, things were happening. In the rare event that I did want to sleep, I couldn't. I must have went a month without sleep after his death. I saw things I still cannot explain. It wasn't him that was doing all these odd things, though. I could tell. It was something far more sinister. Things would fly off the walls. Candles would go out. Brand new CDs would skip. I sound so old writing this. I would hear things, see figures standing over me when I would try to sleep. It was pretty traumatic, to say the least. Now, Kurt would have a sunny disposition. The other spirits I spoke to didn't. I think I opened up about a whole dimension of demonic beings once I began playing. My obsession lasted about 1.5 years, all the while the board being my main focus. I remember speaking to Kurt one night before my parents got home about something new in the media about his case. Not sure what it was, but it was prevalent. I was downstairs when I saw the same picture of Kurt I always had safety pinned to my clothes on the TV scrolling upwards. My mum and dad saw it. My dad still doesn't talk about it, but my mother gets freaked out every time she hears his name. And here's the kicker. The TV was not on and was unplugged. I just calmly walked by it and my mum stopped, screamed my name and asked if I saw it. I replied yes, and that it was just so common at this point. I didn't give it a second glance until she startled me by pointing it out. I have several more chilling stories, but this is the one that's instilled in my mind. Kurt never rested about getting his story to be heard and told me unless she left some evidence behind, everyone else was just going to close him away once dead and gone. I reminded and reassured him that this would never happen. I would always seek the truth and continue to make waves and let the proper authorities know so Courtney could face justice. I'm happy to say that over 20 years later there is evidence of Courtney's intent. I am not entirely sure of the investigation status currently, but know some details recently have been brought to light. I have never dabbled in anything besides homemade tarot cards, but my aunt did. She was known for always being very reckless and carefree. When she was around 15, she left home alone and decided that she wanted to try a Ouija board. Whenever she's been asked why, she just tells us that she's always been curious and wanted to know if it really worked. She had to wait to be alone because my grandfather didn't allow for my aunt to dabble in practices that could go dark, with good reason. When she was home alone, she decided to try it. They didn't have an Ouija board since my grandfather would never allow it, so instead she crafted one out of wood and a Sharpie. I know most of you are thinking that there's no way that that would work, but there have been many cases where it has. If you provide spiritual or demonic entities with a medium you contact with, it doesn't matter what it is. By touching the makeshift wooden planchet with the intent of summoning something, my aunt granted whatever entity access to communicate with her and potentially attach itself to her. Unfortunately, that is what happened. The Ouija board ended up working, much to my aunt's initial delight, and she got in contact with the spirit of an old woman. The woman told her that she could predict the future, so of course, my aunt asked her questions such as, what will I study in university? And where will I be in 20 years? And of course, how will I die? My aunt was a skeptic of this woman's abilities, but knew that she shouldn't ask about the death date. Even if the woman couldn't, the date would still be in my aunt's mind and most likely plague her thoughts. Anyway, the board answered, English, Canada, and for the death date, the same as your mother eventually be, breast cancer. My aunt at the time thought all of these were ludicrous, since she has always wanted to study the sciences in university, was from India and intended to stay there, and at the time, my grandma hadn't got cancer yet. So my aunt, being the ballsy and stupid kid she was, taunted the entity about her disbelief and asked the entity to prove it. So the entity told her that my grandfather would be home in 1 hour earlier than planned and catch her with the board. She didn't believe the entity, of course, and she continued to taunt it. This, in turn, angered it and resulted in becoming hostile towards my aunt. My aunt started experiencing cuts forming on her arms, and they continued to travel upwards. She screamed and threw the planchette right when my grandfather walked in and caught her in the act. Saying he was fuming was apparently an understatement. My grandfather, being very spiritual, closed the board properly by saying goodbye and immediately had a priest come and bless the house. Afterwards, my aunt, of course, was in a lot of trouble. She tried to show my uncle the cuts she received on her arms, only for them to have disappeared. The pain was still there, without any of the physical scarring. It's safe to say my aunt was petrified. The worst part, my aunt went to university to study English. After getting her bachelor's, the whole family immigrated to Canada as my grandfather's visa finally got approved. He was planning this for ages, but the visa took over a decade to be approved. Finally, my grandma has gotten breast cancer twice, and while she still hasn't passed away yet, her time is approaching. My aunt is absolutely petrified and tells us all of the story to ensure we never dabbled in any of these spiritual objects. I myself am quite the skeptic of all things spiritual and demonic in nature. I'm an atheist, but wonder if there is any plausibility to this, because I can't deny that my aunt is always being petrified at the mention of these objects. She is not the type to be frightened easily of anything, so it does make me question whether this is real. Have any of you had similar experiences with an entity that could predict the future or cause cuts on your arms that vanished? Or simply any sort of story revolving around contacting spirits that you think may help me understand all of this more and maybe lower my skepticism? If so, please let me know. So this happened when I was 11 with my brother and his friends, who were a bit older than me. We decided to do a Ouija board session at school, so we went into the teacher's classroom to do it. I didn't really think much of it because I didn't know what it was or what it did. So I put my hand on the planchette and I asked if it was a boy or a girl. The planchette moved to G, so I assumed a girl. I asked if it came to haunt one of us, but then the planchette started moving and spelling out my name. I was very shocked since I didn't tell it my name at all. Then suddenly, I felt something warm trickling down my face. My nose had started to bleed. At that point in life, I'd never had one before. I ran to the bathroom and took care of it, and then when I looked up into the mirror, I saw a little girl, small girl, stood behind me. I wanted to do a poker face and pretend I hadn't seen her. I swiftly looked behind me and saw that no one was there. I was mostly frightened because since I saw the girl, I concluded that it was in fact probably the ghost from the Ouija board. I feel like I am being watched even when I'm taking a shower, with just me inside the bathroom. I'll tell you about my shower story when I wake up after a night's slumber. I hope you all have a great Christmas. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Click that little notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I try to do a video once a week and hope to do more as the channel grows. If you've got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit at r/Lukjanovart. If you want to support me even more, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys. And remember to always say goodbye.